We're going to be talking about what is happening right now in Washington, in Europe, and what's going to happen on Monday. What is going to happen on Monday? Well, essentially, the situation is developing as follows. Okay. So essentially, today, the European are talking to each other and Zelensky, and they're going to meet in Washington on Monday. What What do you care about this? Well, this is very important. This is very important because now we're coming close to a full understanding of where everyone stands. And what I mean everyone, I'm talking about the president, I'm talking about Mark Rubio, and I'm talking about JD Vance. Now these, you notice that they're suddenly coming up and showing up. They're showing up over in Alaska, and there's good reasons for that. There's good reasons for that because at the end of 2026, in the middle to the end, you're going to have elections in the U.S. And these are going to be very crucial. These are going to be crucial elections. And they're going to decide whether or not what's going on with the administration right now, if whatever they're doing actually makes sense and it's going to help, going forward. That's what we're doing. Okay. So, what is really going on? That's a question. Obviously, the European leaders and Zelensky want the war to end, and they want Putin to leave. But that's not going to happen. That is not going to happen. Putin is not going anywhere. Okay, he's not going back. So why do you what you want to know? What you want to know is, okay, but what's the inside working? We've heard the news where we've heard the what they said and what's happening today in Europe. They're talking, and on Monday they're all coming over to the U.S. to talk about it. Right? We heard all that. We're not here for that. What we're here for is to figure out what is really going on. As usual for the Black Swan, what I want from you, is I want you to basically not so much critic what's happening, but understand what's happening. That is more important. You want to understand what's happening and how it's going to impact you, right? What are we talking about? I'm going to give you an example. Isn't that interesting that we had Rubio and JD at that meeting in Alaska, right? What are they there for? After all, it was all about the president and Putin and how they like each other, like I said yesterday. But what's important for you to understand is, what do they each want? What does the president really want? My guess is, at this point, he wants the Nobel Prize, right? I think this is something that he's looking for. And I think that if I know that, obviously, JD and Rubio know that. And that's what they were in Alaska to make sure, well, hold on. Be careful here. Be careful where you're going with this. Because for you to get the Nobel Prize, what's going to need to happen, and this is where you guys come in, they're going to need security guarantees. What does that mean? They're basically saying, fine, let's freeze where everything is. Hopefully that's what they're looking for. But more importantly, who's going to be in the middle to make sure that, Russia stays on that side? And they're thinking U.S. soldiers. Yeah, but, we don't want that. Well, hold that thought. Because Donald Trump has expressed openness. He didn't say, I'm okay, but he just said he has expressed openness to the U.S.-led NATO-style security guarantees during the Alaska summit. He supported talks involving Western troops. However, he did not commit to deploying U.S. troops. Be careful. This is important. Because reports specify that while security guarantees were under discussion, the inclusion of American troops was explicit, not entertained. This is key. And that's why I think Rubio and J.D. Vance were there to say, listen, I know what you want. You want the Nobel Prize, right? So basically, we freeze everything, we stop the weapon, we put some American boots on the ground, and then there's the peace, obviously, because Russia's not going to come over, and then you get your prize. Well, be careful. We don't want that. We do not want even the inkling of any American troops over there. You're aware of that, right? I mean, even Rubio has acknowledged the necessity of robust security guarantees, because at the end of the day, that's the only unless you make Ukraine part of NATO, but that's not going to happen, right? You put some brutes on the ground, but they also know, and I think I made that point yesterday, that NATO does not have the power against Russia, right? They've admitted themselves that Russia is pretty powerful. I mean, you could put some boots on the ground, but if it doesn't work out, what are you going to do? You put some Britain's or United Kingdom troops in the middle. If something happens, they can't fight Russia. Russia is generating 1,500 trucks by the end of the year, 1,500 tanks, like I said, and I'll go over the power that they have. But I mean, you may think that Russia is some, a cheap Chinese whatever. Trust me, the NATO guys himself, okay, said it, that beware, Russia is a lot more powerful. So you're going to put some troops there for what? For show? But if something happens, are you willing to go for it? Everybody knows that you need the Americans in there. Okay? And even that is not so sure because America, is not as strong as you may think. I mean, it's going to be enough. Obviously, nobody wants to mess with the U.S. because it's the U.S., but still, it's so be careful, right? So JD is over there and Rubio to say, whoa, 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 whoa. You know what? We don't want any of this. I know what you want, but I need to be reelected. And who knows what Marco Rubio wants, and I will talk about what he wants and what JD wants, but these guys are eyeballing the MAGA people, and they want to stay close to MAGA. They don't want to lose the MAGA situation. So Vance has historically downplayed the idea of deploying American troops unless it directly serves U.S. interests. After initial speculation, he walked back comments that everything is on the table, reaffirming that Ukraine war is not one that should send U.S. troops into harm's way unless it clearly advances. So he's saying, I don't want any. He's a lot clearer than Trump. Vance is firmly against U.S. troops deployment. Trump is open to security guarantees, but has drawn a firm line that no U.S. boots on American. But right? It's not the same thing. And Rubio supports security guarantees, but does not advocate for U.S. troops deployment. You're not going to be able to secure this thing unless you send American troops over there. There's no way. But at the same time, Trump wants to get the Nobel Prize. So what he's trying to do, he's trying to have his cake and eat it too. And this is where these two guys over there say, listen, no, that's not going to happen. Why? Well, what's going to happen and what's happening right now is MAGA, based on reporting and commentary from conservative media, MAGA movement tends to view security guarantees for Ukraine over very strong skepticism about foreign commitments, right? Framing as a negotiating tool, not a promise. Contrast with globalist foreign policy. Now, the reason this is important for you, right, is that if for some reason, these guys come to Washington tomorrow and they talk and they say, well, okay, fine, I'm going to stay where I am. I'm okay with them taking 20% of the country. I don't want anything else. Okay, let's freeze the border and everything else. But I need guarantees that they're not going to attack. And unless you want to make me a member of NATO's, I say that's not going to happen. Then how do I know these guys are not going to be involved? They're going to say, well, the French and the English are going to say, well, we'll put some troops there. But Zelensky's going to say, well, what is that going to do? You guys can't fight Russian. We've been fighting these people for 3 years, and we're kind of very slowly losing the war. Right? So we need the Americans in there. We need U.S. in there. That's what's going to happen. And of course, I mean, put a couple of soldiers just for show, whatever. Who knows, right? And then we got a peace deal. And then you have a peace deal. And then Trump gets his Nobel Prize. Everybody's happy. He goes home, except the MAGA people, because now you've committed UK, U.S. troops in Ukraine in front of Russia. That's not going to happen. But yet the temptation is very strong. Very, very strong. And right now, Zelensky is weak. Why he's weak? He's weak because he's lost a certain amount of standing in front of the European because of what he did by trying to circumvent and crush the people in Ukraine that were looking for corruption. And that's what happened. And unfortunately, this if there's a time to do it, now is the time to do it. Now is the best time to do it. Now is the time to hit it and hit hard and get what you want. But are they going to get it? And that's the question everybody's asking, because right now, unfortunately, the situation is such that they're not so sure that that's a possibility right now, because there's a lot of conflicting interests. And you need to understand, and I will tell you why this is important for you, because I tell you, if somehow this thing goes sideways meaning, well, let's involve troops, and Trump says, okay, somehow, in some weird little fashion, but somehow the U.S. troops are involved, then you lose MAGA, right? Then the Democrats are going to say, see, we're back in another war. And they told us they didn't want to go into a war. Why are we doing here? And then you're going to have this, because you notice that J.D. Vance hasn't said anything, okay, apart from real estate. The only one that said something at this point is Marco Rubio, and you do not want to lose that election you don't want to lose that election in the U.S. in May in 2026, because then you're going to have a lame duck president, where you're going to have Congress with the Democrats and you're going to have the Senate with the Republican, and nothing gets done. Definitely nothing's going to get done, and a lot needs to get done. As I said in this channel, as you could see, the swan there, we're looking for a black swan. And right now, this whole thing is holding together because the president has total control over everything. Now, is he doing the right thing? That's a different topic. But you need control. Otherwise, if you lose control, then anything could go. And right now, you've got the national debt that needs to be taken care of. You got the economy that needs taken care of. The stock market is doing great, but be careful. How long is that going to last? You need the dollar, the tariffs, Powell, Israel, China that's decoupling, inflation, Russia, obviously, and the Maxwell thing that's going on. So if you've got all this, if you got the power behind you, like the House and the Senate, and then you do whatever you want, which is what's happening right now. But if you lose any of this because of what's happening with Ukraine, then we're off to the races. We're off to the races. You do not want to be going off to the races right now, my friend. Why? Because it's going to be a lot of damage. So what do we have right now? Well, right now, they're getting ready for Washington tomorrow. Why? Well, because the Europeans are coming along with Zelensky. The Europeans? I'll tell you who's coming tomorrow. And not so sure where they're coming, because if what I think that they're asking for, they're not gonna get any of it. Okay. What do you have? Well, you got the European Commission President, Ursula von der Leyen, which Trump really does not like, does not recognize. He doesn't recognize Europe. He looks at Europe the same way he looks at BRICS, right? Basically, you guys came around to just circumvent and bring down the power of the U.S. You're basically trying to circumvent and be a balancing, which you do what you want, but obviously that is not something that he's looking forward. The UK Prime Minister is coming. That's his friend. Well, he's the only guy that got a 10% tariff, so that's good. Got the French president there, always very active. He needed to get in there, taking charge. He's the only one, apart from the UK, he speaks a pretty good English, so that should be helpful. And he's been, quote-unquote, a friend of the president, although Trump made fun of him, so not too much respect going on. You have the Chancellor, Merz, but the guy doesn't speak English. That's going to be tough to get along. He's got Meloni, which he likes. He's been around with the Italian Prime Minister for quite some time. He's got Mark Rutte, the NATO secretary, that called him daddy. So that's good. And then he's got the Finnish president, Alexander Stubb. What do we care about this guy? Well, you care about this guy because Trump likes to go play golf with him and likes him a lot. And he's the one that actually brought this whole thing together, not this meeting, but previous meetings. So overall, out of the 7 people, they're all very amenable to Trump at the end of the day, except maybe the German chancellor. And but all these people, this should be a very good meeting. And that's a problem. If it's too much of a good meeting and too much of a good friends getting together, then what do they want? They want to show the European unity and solidarity. That makes sense, the joint appearance. And of course, Zelensky is going to be there. That's going to be interesting. A strategic move to ensure that Ukraine isn't negotiating alone, especially in the wake of the Trump-Putin summit. Okay. Number two, the second reason, and this is the point of this video, they want to support for the robust security guarantees. European leaders are pushing for concrete NATO-style security assurance for Ukraine alongside support from the U.S. So they are kind of going to push Trump, say, yeah, U.S. troops, they're determined to secure a defense framework. And Trump really wants to make these things work because at the end he's seeing the Nobel Prize. It's within reach, But that's going to be a problem for many in the U.S. to get any troops anywhere near this place. Of course, it ensures that Ukraine has a seat at the table. Well, yeah, obviously, but, they have no legs to stand on. And, of course, pressure on U.S. to commit, right? The leaders are reinforcing that any lasting strategy must include diplomatic, economic, and potentially military contingency, and they expect the U.S. to match their level of commitment. They want the U.S. in there. That's what you have to worry about. They want the U.S. in there with them to secure the border or whatever. I mean, not that border, the other border, so that, everybody's together. And but no, because that could be a problem. Because the MAGA people do not want the U.S., quote unquote, involved in any more of these wars. Well, but that's not going to be a war. Well, these things have a tendency to move sideways very quickly. Right? And that's what you need to be worried about. That's what you need to be concerned. And the reason how these things evolve in very weird way, no more wars. The only thing is, imagine all these people are quote unquote friends. These are friends or, good interest from Trump's view. So they kind of say, okay, the U.S. involved, very nice, thank you. Zelensky, you're a bit weak, so you're going to have to give up something. You can't just come in and say, I want everything back, because that's not going to happen. And we put our troops there, but we know that we're not that strong against Russia, so we need the U.S. in there. And Trump says, well, maybe some security guarantees. And Trump, he said no, but he didn't say, he also said yes in kind of a way. And that is a problem, right? Because then it's so easy that then you just grab the statue and you got your Nobel Peace Prize. But then, unfortunately for the Republicans, then you're going to have to defend yourself and say, guys, you made fun of us in front of the Democrats that we were supposed to get out of Afghanistan. And look at you, now we are in boots. And if anything happens, right, some kind of problem, an accident, now you have to do something. And are you ready to do that other thing that nobody wants to talk about? Because now you're back to the races with Russia, and then you get Russia. This is very, very tricky. My concern is that if the U.S. commits to something like that, but it's the only way it's going to happen. They tell you They want four things, these people. They want show of European unity and solidarity. They want support for robust security guarantees. I mean, the U.S. got to get in there. They want to ensure Ukraine has a seat at the table. Fine, you could sit, but at the end of the day, you're going to lose 20% of your country. And pressure on the U.S. to commit. So out of the four, two of them have to do with the U.S. We're not just talking here. You got to commit. We need you to commit. And that's a commitment that a guy like J.D. Vance, right? J.D. Vance has called on Europe to step up for Ukraine. Well, you're stepping up, but you're bringing the U.S. along, right? Vance urged European allies to take on a greater financial and military roles in supporting Ukraine, noting that Americans are growing wary of bearing the conflict's burden. So I don't think that J.D. is going to like the idea of the U.S. getting in there. He pointed out, however, that much of Europe's aid still depends on U.S.-made weaponry. So maybe you don't go, but you give weapons? You're still involved. J.D. Vance is skeptical about the peace deal value. Speaking on Fox News, Vance expressed doubt that a negotiated peace between Russia and Ukraine would fully satisfy either side. He emphasized the inherent complexity and the low likelihood an agreement that both parties find acceptable. You know what? If there's no deal, it's fine with him. Let's just go home. Let's just go home, get the weapons, don't get involved, right? And get out. But that's not going to be good. Supports trilateral meaning. Okay, Vance affirmed the U.S. aims for dialogue includes, so we got all three. Zelensky needs to get in there, knowing very well that's never going to happen. When this is what you need to understand. These people have interest, right? When J.D. Vance says, "I want Zelensky in there," automatically it means that's not going to happen because Putin doesn't want to talk to the guy. We have a bilateral meeting. This is not going to happen. There is no way, because Zelensky is basically going to say, you need to leave. Because don't forget, one of the requests from Putin is to actually have a territory that he has partially conquered, but not completely. And he wants that as well. So not only you got to give him what he already has, so, he has it, but then you got to give him what he doesn't have. Is Zelensky willing to do that? Well, he's weak. The Europeans are there, going to pressure him. They're going to say, fine, then everybody loses something. When you negotiate, everybody has to lose something. Otherwise, it is not a good negotiation. So what needs to happen? Well, the U.S. needs to put boots on the ground. Ukraine loses 20%. The European Union puts some boots on the ground as well. And Russia stops. So everybody loses something. So that's a good deal. Right? It's a good deal. But it's not a good deal for MAGA. Right? J.D. Vance and Secretary of State Rubio are very visibly positioning themselves in the aftermath. You're going to see them in the Trump meeting, but in different ways. J.D. Vance has a strategic framing in his mind, a diplomatic sequencing, a political subtext, right? He's motioning for credibility as a statement. He's preparing himself to be president. Marco Rubio, on the other hand, is carving a political persona, right? Statesman's persona. So they are positioning themselves, both of them. And they need to realize that this is not going to be something that's going to be done easily. It is not going to be done easily, and what you need to watch for is to make sure, at the end of the day, it's very simple. You do not want boots on the ground. Okay? You do not want boots on the ground, because if you have boots on the ground, you're going to lose. You're going to lose it. Now, how much of that is going to happen? That's a question. And what you need to realize, because this channel is about understanding the risks that are running right now, you want to make sure that this doesn't torpedo all the other efforts that are going on with the administration, because then it will impact you, right? Because For example, the U.S. has lots and lots and lots of deal, right, going on right now with these countries. Japan said I'm going to give you 550. Europe said I'm going to give you 750 plus 600 billions, right? Trying to get India's attention. You're trying to do all of these things, but if you can't get it done, right? If you can't get these people to commit, then you lose control of the left hand. Basically Japan's going to say, "Oh, when I was saying 550. Well, let's talk some more because I'm not really mean 550 since now you don't have you lost Congress, so I really don't have to." And he didn't sign anything, right? So everything gets lost, and you're trying to get India's attention, and because you want them to start buying oil from Russia and all that, all that goes away. All that goes away if you lose if you lose Congress, and because that's what's at play right now. And don't forget, and hopefully, as my subscribers, I want you to start thinking in those ways. These guys are not thinking about Monday. They're thinking about Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and then next year. How is all this going to play out? Because everyone is going to be pulling those videos out when if this thing goes south, they're going to be pulling those videos and say, "What? You allowed this to happen, Marco? JD, I thought you were with us." But then make it clear that you don't want boots on the ground. Because if you're the president right now, what do you want to look forward for? You're not going to be reelected. There's a bit of psychology involved. You're not going to be president anymore. So what's your legacy? What is going to be your legacy? And what's more than having the Nobel Peace Prize? Now, I'm going over this thing about the Nobel Peace Prize over and over and over because Donald Trump does want it, or at least deeply desires a Nobel Peace Prize. In fact, he said it. In February of 2025, he expressed frustration that he hasn't been awarded the Nobel Peace Prize, saying, they will never give me the Nobel. I deserve it. He said, no, I don't want a Nobel Peace Prize no matter what. I do, including Russia and Ukraine, but the people know, and that's all that matters to me. Trump cold called Norway's finance minister, reportedly out of the blue, to discuss both tariffs and his chance of winning the Nobel Prize. Norway. Finland, and the guy from Finland is coming. Multiple countries, including Pakistan, Israel, Cambodia, have officially nominated Trump for the Nobel Peace Prize, citing his role in brokering agreements such as ceasefire and peace talks. That's what's driving him. Observers have speculated that Trump's urgency in pushing for peace deals, in particular regarding Ukraine, is driven by personal aspiration for Nobel recognition. Former security advisor John Bolton was more blunt, saying Trump's fixation is well known. I think that Trump has made it clear that he wants a Nobel Prize for more than anything else. And that is a problem. I see this as a problem. Not that he doesn't deserve it. It's just, what is he willing to do to get it? And he might be willing to put boots on the ground or put the U.S. in the middle to guarantee the security and all that. And that, unfortunately, is not going to do well with the MAGA people. They're not going to want that. Okay? Now, JD Vance, okay, remember, he has called on Europe, right? Yeah, Hillary Clinton, that's right, wants to nominate Trump for the Nobel Peace Prize if this thing with Ukraine and Russia works. Oh, that's so nice of her to want that for him. Really, don't believe that for 1 second. Of course she wants that because she's thinking the same way. That's right. Go and get it. And in the process, commits the U.S. to have boots on the ground, and that's going to tank your effort with the Republicans, and the Democrats will take it, because that's how these people think. They don't think just, well, it's nice for him. She said it. If he gets the Ukraine deal going, and then yes, I will nominate him. knowing what's at stake. Remember, these people have interests. They have no friends or enemy. They have interests, and you need to start thinking in that way. She's saying, "Yeah, of course I want you to do it, because the only way for you to get it, you know it. You know the Europeans are not going to be able to do anything. They need you. They need us, and you're going to have to commit U.S. troops." And she remembers. She remembers what happened with the Benghazi thing and all those issues that she faced. And now you're gonna have it as well, because you want the Nobel Prize and you're willing to do anything for it. It's a cruel world. It's a very cruel world, and you need to understand these people, because obviously, as they go back and forth, these people all have jobs, but that could impact you. That could impact you big time. How? If this thing doesn't go well, right, and the president basically says, okay, fine, he goes to the European and says that the only way we're going to do it is if you commit some troops. And he says, well, maybe we could do something. And then JD comes out saying, we don't want that, or there's an intercation and there's a problem, there's a friction there. That's going to be weakness. And you know how the president reacts to these things. Doesn't like it at all. It's going to be a mess. And then, of course, as you commit, which he has the right to commit, he gets his Nobel Peace Prize. But then the election, I guess in July it starts, July, October, November, and then they're gonna say, look, and what are the odds that you get all these people lining up right on the border, with all the fighting that goes on and all the killing that happened, that you don't have some Russian soldiers that kills some. You know what I mean? Anything could happen. And then you get involved. And then the Democrats were going to say, see, we're back to Palookaville again. And you guys made fun of us, told us we couldn't do this, and you're back and you can't avoid it. So don't tell us about Afghanistan and all these things that you used against us. Now we're going to use it against you. And by the way, you just lost Congress. And by the way, now everything that you want to do, we're going to say no. And we're going to take a look at this tariff situation, quite frankly, which we don't think you actually have the right to charge Brazil 50% and India 50%. And, and everything comes down. And then the Europeans are going to say, well, I know I was going to buy $750 billion of energy from the U.S., but frankly, we never wrote. I mean, we need to talk about it. And then the whole thing just collapses. This is how tight. This is how tight this situation is right now. Now, could it go away? Well, I mean, it's not going to go away, because tomorrow you've got these people coming to Washington, and who are the people? Well, basically, who are the people coming to Washington? We've got. Let me give you a breakdown. And you've got and he doesn't really like her, the European Commission president, so she's showing up. But you got a friend. You got Kurt Steimer. You're the UK Prime Minister. Trump likes him. Emmanuel Macron likes to make fun of him. Italian Prime Minister, he likes her. That's 3. The NATO Secretary General, that basically said he's my daddy. That's him. That's 4. And then the Finnish president, who he's been playing golf for. So out of the 7 people that are showing up, he likes 5 of them. And of course, there's Zelensky, which, who knows? But the point, all these people are going to say, Donald, come on. And all you need to do is this, and then we're done. And Zelensky, and don't forget, Zelensky lost a lot of power with the European last year because of what he tried to do. They say, we don't like this idea. So, and why are they attending? They're attending to show off European unity and solidarity. This joint appearance is Zelensky's strategic move to ensure Ukraine isn't negotiating alone. But out of the 4 points that they want, support for robust security guarantee is one, and pressure on the U.S. to commit. The European leaders are pushing for concrete NATO-style security assurance for Ukraine. Let's be there. Let's get in the middle. Let's make sure we could do something. And they want to pressure on the U.S. to commit by presenting as a coalition. All this wouldn't happen if Joe wasn't president. By presenting as a coalition, European leaders are enforcing that any lasting strategy must include diplomatic, economic, and potentially military contingency. So what is the rest of the world saying? Well, as usual, I mean, the entire press corps is against this thing. The entire press corps is against, whatever the U.S. is trying to do right now. Stab in the back. Kiev reels as Trump embraces Putin terms. The European leaders rally around Zelensky. Trump has rolled out the red carpet and he got little in return. I mean, these are tough European leaders to back Zelensky in Washington, hoping to counter Putin. You're going to counter what? You want Putin to leave and get out? That's not going to happen. The Europeans expect President Trump to pressure the Ukrainian leader to accept concessions. Okay, but if you don't accept concessions, what are you going to do? What are you going to do? Right? If you don't pressure the guy, what are you going to do? It's not going to happen. You need to be able to do it. So that's a situation right now. That is what's happening, and that is what you need to keep in mind. You need to keep that in mind because that could be a lot of damage, right? If these people don't show up and drag the U.S. into more of a situation. Why? Well, because all this, frankly, right now, J.D. Vance and Marco Rubio are very visibly positioning themselves in the aftermath. They want to make sure that, because they realize that what Trump is looking for, they want to make sure that they also are taken care of. J.D. Vance has a strategic framing in mind. These people are playing chess. Vance has been emphasizing that Europe must step up in Ukraine, aligning with Trump's America First approach. This projects him as a voice of realist restraint within the administration. Diplomatic sequencing. By saying Trump-Putin talks had to happen before, Vance is reinforcing Trump's primacy while still carving out his own role as a strategist who understands sequencing. Political. His skepticism about any peace deal fully satisfying both sides, giving space to appear clear-eyed and pragmatic. They want their cake and eat it too as well. Marco Rubio is more of a guardian of principles. Rubio has been stressing that Trump stance hasn't changed. We're still the same, although he knows what's really happening, while also warning that Ukraine must be part of any real deal. Meaning, you got to give up something. We're not going to go in the middle and you keep everything. That's not going to happen. He has a steady hand defending continuity, sanction, and consequences, right? By signaling that new sanction may be necessary, and that's something that he just recently said. If Putin isn't serious, he's leaving himself as a tough but pragmatic diplomat. He's kind of threatening Putin right now. As Secretary of State, Rubio has repeatedly engaged with Lavrov and American leaders, European leaders, portraying himself as a chief architect of the actual negotiation, not a spokesman. They are positioning themselves for what happens next. This looks like motioning as a diplomat in chief, making sure he is not overshadowed by Trump or Vance. This is a very fine balance that's happening in front of you. This is very interesting, and you should understand it, because if this thing goes sideways, then everything goes sideways. We're going to lose everything. We shall see. We shall see what they decide tomorrow, right? But theoretically speaking, we should see a lot more views. We should see a lot more understanding of what's happening, and hopefully these guys actually get it done. But is this what's going to happen? We shall see. So let's see what happens. Let's see what happens tomorrow. It should be should be quite interesting, and hopefully we get some more leeway on this.